All right, let's get into one of the most brutal stories from the ancient world. It's about how the Roman Republic, this rising superpower, looked at its biggest rival and decided that just winning wasn't enough. No, they wanted to wipe them off the face of the earth completely and utterly. Just listen to this phrase: Carthage must be destroyed. For years, a Roman politician named Cato the Elder ended every single speech with those words. I mean, it didn't matter what he was talking about, taxes, roads, whatever, that was always his closing line. Talk about being obsessed, right? It was this relentless, nagging call for total annihilation. So, that's the big question here, isn't it? Why? Why this level of pure hatred? What could Carthage have possibly done to make the most powerful republic in the world want to just erase it? Well, let's dig in and find out. Okay, so our story is a classic clash of the titans. In one corner, you've got the Roman Republic, and in the other, the great city of Carthage. For a long, long time, these two were the heavyweights of the Western Mediterranean, the absolute biggest players in the game. But here's the thing. Their strengths were polar opposites. Carthage, which was in modern-day Tunisia, was all about the sea. It was a city of sailors and traders. All their power came from their huge navy and their control of the trade routes. Rome, totally different story. Rome was a land power. Its strength was its legendary army, those disciplined, unstoppable legions that had already conquered most of Italy. It's the ultimate matchup, right? The shark versus the tiger. So Carthage was what historians call a maritime empire. And that sounds fancy, but it just means their empire wasn't one big chunk of land. Instead, think of it like a huge network of cities and islands spread all across the sea, all connected by their powerful navy. They absolutely ruled the waves, and that control made them incredibly, incredibly rich. Naturally, a rivalry this intense was bound to explode. And it did, in a series of huge wars we now call the Punic Wars. Now, it's the second of these wars that gives us one of the most famous and brilliant generals in all of history, a man named Hannibal Barca. Hannibal, he did something nobody thought was possible. He decided to do the absolute unthinkable. See, Rome probably expected an attack from the sea. So what did Hannibal do? He marched his entire army, and yes, that includes giant war elephants, on this treacherous, freezing journey right over the Alps to attack Rome from the north, on its own turf. It was an absolutely audacious, almost crazy plan. And, this wasn't just a quick fight. We're talking about a rivalry that spanned more than a century. It was this long, grinding struggle for survival, fought across 3 huge, separate wars. Once he got into Italy, Hannibal proved he was a military genius, plain and simple. His masterpiece was the Battle of Zama. He was facing a Roman army that was way bigger than his. So he did something clever. He arranged his soldiers in a crescent shape, like a U. He let the Romans charge right into the middle of it, and then, snap, he closed the trap, folding in the sides and surrounding them completely. The result was just catastrophic for Rome. It was one of the bloodiest single days in all of ancient military history. Over 50,000 Roman soldiers were killed. Imagine that! It was a devastating, humiliating defeat. The city of Rome was in a total panic. But, and this is so important, they refused to surrender. And that's really what made Rome so tough. They never gave up. They took their losses, they learned, they adapted, and eventually they found their own brilliant general, someone who could go toe-to-toe with Hannibal. His name was Scipio. Scipio's strategy was absolutely genius. Instead of just banging his head against Hannibal's army in Italy, he thought outside the box. First, he attacked Carthaginian lands in Spain, cutting off Hannibal's supply lines and his money. And then he basically pulled a Hannibal on Hannibal. He invaded Carthage's home turf in North Africa, forcing the fight over there. Well, that move worked perfectly. It forced Carthage to call Hannibal all the way back home to defend the city. And that's where the two great generals finally faced off, at the Battle of Zama. In a pretty incredible twist, Scipio actually used tactics he'd learned from studying Hannibal to win the day. Just like that, the Second Punic War was over. Rome had won, and Carthage was left completely crippled. Okay, so Carthage lost. Big time. Its empire was gone, its army was basically non-existent. So why, decades later, do you still have this guy, Cato, in Rome obsessively chanting, "Carthage must be destroyed"? What was he so afraid of? Well, this really explains it all. Look at their military power. It's at rock bottom. But their economic wealth? Whoa, that's starting to creep back up. See, Carthage was a city of merchants at its heart, and they were good at it. They were starting to get rich again. And for paranoid Romans like Cato, a rich Carthage, no matter how weak, was always going to be a threat. That fear just wouldn't go away. So Rome basically manufactured a reason to go to war. They issued this final, impossible demand. They told the people of Carthage, you have to abandon your city, your home, for hundreds of years and move 10 miles inland, away from the sea. For people whose entire culture and livelihood was tied to the ocean, this wasn't just a demand, it was a death sentence. Of course they refused, and that refusal was exactly the excuse Rome was looking for. This leads us to the Third Punic War, but honestly, you can't really call it a war. It was a siege, just one final, brutal act of destruction against a city that couldn't really fight back anymore. So what exactly is a siege? Well, it's pretty simple and pretty horrifying. The Roman army completely surrounded the city of Carthage. They built walls and blockades, cutting it off from the rest of the world. Nothing and no one gets in or out. No food, no water, no supplies. The whole goal is to just wait and starve the city until it gives up. But the thing is, Carthage didn't surrender. The people inside fought with this incredible, desperate bravery. They turned the whole city into one giant weapons factory. There's this famous story that the women cut off their own long hair so it could be woven into ropes for the catapults. And they held out like this for 3 long, agonizing years against the most powerful army in the world. Finally, in 146 BC, the Romans breached the walls. But even then, the fight wasn't over. What followed was 6 straight days of brutal, street-by-street, house-by-house fighting. The Romans set buildings on fire just to clear a path forward. It was absolute horror. At the very end, the last handful of defenders finally surrendered. And this is where it goes from a military victory to total annihilation. The Roman Senate didn't just want to capture the city, they gave the order, tear it all down. Every single building, every house, every temple, every wall was demolished and leveled to the ground. They literally wanted to erase the city of Carthage from memory, as if it had never even existed. The destruction of Carthage was a massive turning point. It cemented Rome's absolute power, for sure. But it also did something else. It left us with a completely one-sided story. I mean, think about it. With its greatest rival gone, Rome was now the undisputed master of the Mediterranean. That rich farmland around Carthage, it became the breadbasket of the Roman Empire, growing grain to feed everyone. But here's the most crucial takeaway. Because Carthage was so completely obliterated, almost everything we know about them, we know from the Romans, the very people who destroyed them. All of their books, their records, their stories, it was all lost. All of it turned to dust. And that leaves us with this really haunting question, doesn't it? If history is always written by the winners, what stories do we lose? We have Rome's side of the story, their great triumph. But what was the Carthaginian story? What incredible knowledge, what art, what tales of exploration were lost forever when that city burned? It makes you think, what other amazing histories have been completely erased, lost to us forever?